This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Taliban announces a new interim government for Afghanistan. Calm returns in Conakry as regional bloc ECOWAS set to hold extraordinary summit on Guinean coup. And UN footage of northern Ethiopia shows humanitarian crisis. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe and joining me with the business headlines is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Egypt records the highest monthly revenue from the Suez Canal. And Tanzania seeks new taxpayers to increase its revenue collection. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. The Taliban has officially announced an interim government in Afghanistan just 3 weeks after they took over Kabul. On Tuesday, Taliban spokesman Zabihallah Mujahid said the new caretaker government will be led by one of the group's founders, Mohammad Hassan Akoud. Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, who is the co-founder of the Taliban, will serve as his deputy. Mullah Mohammed Yaqub, who has been named as defense minister, and Sirajuddin Haqqani appointed the interior minister. The Taliban spokesman only named 33 members appointed to a post and said the remaining positions will be announced after careful deliberation. No Minister for Women's Affairs was announced in the press briefing, but the Taliban urged that there should not be protests in the country until the administration forms rules and regulations for rallies. Earlier, the Taliban fired gunshots in the air to disperse protesters. Hundreds of people demonstrated on Tuesday outside the Pakistani embassy, accusing the country of meddling. They were protesting against a visit by Pakistan's head of military intelligence at the weekend. General Faiz Hamid led a delegation to discuss security, the economy and trade. Let's cross now to Kabul. CGTN's Zmarilai Abbasin is standing by. Zmarilai, we now have the first names in a new government. What can you tell us about them?
Hello, Peninah. Finally, the government that the Taliban have been calling it inclusive is announced mostly or 100% established by the members of the Taliban senior leadership. And that's what finally coming out. But the Taliban spokesperson and from now on, Deputy of Culture and Information Ministry stressed that it's for a short term. When everything is solved, we will be working on the formal and final government for Afghanistan. Yet there are many more positions empty and it will be filled soon, according to Zabiullah Mujahid. As we see the list of 33, the new cabinet and take care government of the Taliban is now being available. There are names of just two Tajiks, and there are also Taliban members, including their military officials. And also, on the other hand, two major names, two fractions of Taliban, the Haqqani and Akhundzada. So these are the names coming out, and yet there are people of the Taliban or the senior members that will be holding very sectorial ministries like Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, and also the central bank it's been already appointed. So all of these issues are now under criticism that the Taliban were emphasizing for a month, and before that they will form an inclusive government. They came up with an interim option and a take care government for the Afghanistan, and all the names in the list of the Taliban cabinets or Taliban senior members, no one but all of them are the Taliban senior leadership members. So on the other hand, the Taliban say it's for a short term, so we have to wait how long it will be lasting, that interim or take care government of the Taliban, and how would it react accordingly. And at the same time, when Zabiullah Mujahid was announcing the names of the new government, There was also a statement by Taliban Supreme Leader Mullah Hebatullah Khunzada, and he was stressing out on several issues on education, economy, the ethnics in Afghanistan, the needs and necessaries for the people of Afghanistan, security, and also progress of Afghanistan. While he has also emphasized in the statement that Afghanistan wants positive and affirmative relationship with the region and the world, and he also thanked the Islamic countries, according to Mullah Hebatullah Khunzada, for helping and assisting Taliban member, as he's stating them, Mujahideen. So all of these issues will have very much impact and reaction, and that's what we will wait for the tomorrow, and obviously much more criticism is on the way.
All right, as Marilai Abbasin in Kabul, thank you very much for joining us. Now let's widen this conversation, and joining us is David Otto Endley, an international defense and security analyst. He's also the director on security for Horn of Africa Institute for Peace and Security. He joins us via Zoom from London. Thank you very much, David, for your time tonight. So what do you make of Taliban's new appointments?
I think it's been very exciting because since the Taliban took over just 20 years after they've been in the cold as an insurgency, everyone was expecting to see a new government. The international community of, both Afghanis, they wanted to see a new government. But again, we've got to make it very clear that this is only an interim government and it's not yet complete. Of course, we would see when that comes. But significantly, what we've seen is that, people like Alhaji Mullah Hassan Akund, has been named as the prime minister, of course, an interim. He's one of the founders of the Taliban, but also comes from the Taliban stronghold of Kandahar. Then, one of the key figures that negotiated, the peace deal between the Taliban, the Afghan government, and the U.S., Abdul Ghani Baradar, he's the first deputy. So he's going to be working very closely, of course, with Mullah Hassan Akund, together with the second deputy, Mullah Abdul Salam. Now, you've got to remember that they've named Caliph Haibatullah Akhundzada, who has not been seen. He remains the supreme leader, of the new Islamic Emirates government. Now, the very important party that we've also seen is Mullah Yaqub Mujahid, who is now the defense minister. He used to be, of course, he's the son of Mullah Omar, who used to be one of the main founders of the Taliban government. But again, the biggest beneficiaries of this new government are the Haqqani, family. I think we've seen, Sarajuddin Haqqani. He's been named as the interior minister. Remember, he's on the FBI most wanted list, in Afghanistan. Also, we have Abdul Bakr Haqqani, who is the education minister, Najibullah Haqqani, who is the telecommunications minister, and Rehman Haqqani takes the refugees ministry. So the Haqqani network, which of course is responsible for security within Afghanistan, as we've seen in Kabul airport, has made a very significant gain. They've had the lion's share of the government network. Again, we've seen Mullah Ami Khan, who is the foreign ministry. I mean, he was the one who was sent to negotiate with the Panjdi resistance leaders, especially the people like Ahmad Massoud's son, Ahmad Massoud, and then also Amrullah Saleh. So Mulawi Ami Khan has a big job in his hands as a foreign minister. He has to interact with all the neighboring countries, Pakistan, China, India, Russia, but also importantly, countries like Russia and Qatar. Then another person that made it to the list, is Haidatullah Badri, who is the finance minister. Remember, Taliban, since they took over the country, has been suffering from economic issues. So the finance minister would have a huge job in their hands. Now, another important party is Kwari Fashuddin, who is now the chief of army staff for the defense ministry. So these are very key individuals. The spokesman himself, Zabihullah Mujahid, he's now the communications and information and culture minister. So those are the key positions that we've seen. But again, it comes down to, is this an inclusive government? Because we haven't seen any ministry of, any women in any of the positions. But also there has been a ministry that will look after the women's affairs, but no women in the government.
Okay, so we're running out of time, David, but just very briefly, as you said, this is only just an interim government, but it is a government that comes in with when the country is facing numerous challenges. How will it tackle these challenges? Very briefly.
I think the biggest challenge that it has is to consolidate power, especially with the resistance movement that is in Banshee, but also the economic situation in the country. It's a new country, of course, it's been there, but they have to rebuild the country. They have to gain trust of the international community. This new government has to promise that it can secure its borders and prevent groups like Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State of the Khorasan province, from also taking hold and finding a safe haven in Afghanistan. So these are some of the key issues. But more importantly, they've got to do some work, and hopefully they can start work as soon as possible.
All right, David Otto Endley in London, thank you very much for your time. And now we head to Guinea, and following a coup over the weekend, military forces are now consolidating their takeover. Several army officers have been installed in regional and administrative offices. This comes as ECOWAS plans to hold an extraordinary summit on Guinea. Scheduled for Wednesday, the meeting comes as the West African Regional Bloc demanded for a return to constitutional rule. It has also threatened sanctions on the country. On Sunday, special forces led by Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya ousted long-time President Alpha Condé and dissolved the constitution. The coup leader has since vowed to form a government of national union to oversee a political transition.
A global consultation will be opened to outline the broad framework of the transition, and a government of national unity will be put in place to lead the transition. The committee intends to reassure our economic and financial partners that activities in the country will continue normally. Mining companies are also asked to continue their activities. To this end, the maritime borders remain open for export and mining products.
Staying in Guinea, CGTN, in an exclusive interview, discussed the country's political future with the economic advisor to President Alpha Condé. The presidential advisor began by confirming that the military was now in power.
First of all, I would like to confirm that the military strength has taken the power yesterday, the 5th September 2021, without any bloodness, but by force. This, and already they have already made in place one committee that we call CNRD, National Committee for Gathering and Development. Their first declaration was that making all Guineans together in order to improve their social development and the construction of the nation by inviting everybody for working together to improve the real situation of people, Guinean people. For now, they have made some decisions like replacing the governor and the prefect by the military authority, and also replacing the minister by the vice minister, and also that we call in Guinea general secretary. Also today, they have made some meeting. The first aim of this meeting, they asked the minister to give back all the keys of the car and the office traveling document to the secretary of each car, of each department. And now they are planning to make like a national committee government in coming days, like which we call transitional government. The specific aims of this government is not defined yet. The composition also of this government is not defined. We're waiting for the consultation with the vital force of the nation. I mean, the political parties, the National Assembly, and others.
In Somalia, President Mohamed Abdullah Farmajo and his Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble are at loggerheads over the dismissal of the country's spy chief. The two leaders released opposing statements over the dismissal of Fahad Yassin. On Monday, Yassin was suspended over the mysterious death of female intelligence agent Ikran Tahlil. Prime Minister Roble expressed his dissatisfaction in a report released by the National Intelligence Agency, which claimed Tahlil was abducted and killed by militant group Al-Shabaab. President Farmajo defended the spy chief, asking him to continue with his work. Residents in Mogadishu say this fallout shines a light on issues of governance in the country.
I am an old man. I have known the system of governance in all my life. People here don't know the system of governance. The president, prime minister, the cabinet or other arms of the government don't seem to know about governance. Everyone seems to be sharing their decisions on the social media, and that is not how we should govern.
The article in the Constitution which grants power to both the President and the PM to appoint senior government officials is the weakness in our Constitution. The Constitution doesn't also detail the way forward when the President's term expires. There should have been a whole chapter explaining the powers during the transitional period. It is not there. It's the only Article 103 which states that the caretaker government will carry out routine duties.
And joining me now to talk more about Somalia is Ahmed Abdi Hadi. He is a political analyst. Thank you, Ahmed, for joining us tonight. What do you make of the recent developments in Mogadishu, and what do they say about the political situation in the country?
Thank you very much for having me. You know, it's always part of Somali political culture to have this type of controversies. And because it's largely because you don't have the constitutional court to determine such type of controversies, and the constitution itself is professional. And the question right now is the mysterious death, as you stated, of a spy agent, and there is a controversy how to manage it, because the man who heads the spy of Somalia is a key ally of the president, and is also responsible for key political and security infrastructures for the president. And as you know, the mandate, the constitutional mandate of the president has expired, and the prime minister is now in charge of running the country and elections. And he gets support from the public, in particular case of Ikran, and also from the opposition forces and key regional states. So it's a difficult situation right now, as the elections of the countries is taking place, and I think there is now a mediation between the president and prime minister to solve this fallout.
Okay, you mentioned the upcoming elections, Ahmed. Let's talk about that. How is this fallout between the president and his prime minister likely to impact those elections which have already been postponed?
You know, the elections has taken a very long time to happen in the country, and Somalia is in a fragile situation where the political development is not full-fledged, and you know, there is a pressure from international community that the elections should be wholly no, and there is an effort from the Somali civil society and other key stakeholders. But this question, I think, about the controversy of the sacking of the chief of spy will be concluded in coming next days, and elections will restart. As you know, the elections are almost going in the country, where the Senate, some parts of the Senate seats has been already elected, and the Prime Minister today speaking said that he's determined to continue the elections. I don't think that this case will not largely impact the elections, but it's all may damage the aspirations, and I think of the president to be re-elected again, because he comes against the wide sentiment of the public and intellectuals, as well as opposition forces, how he managed to this Ikram Tahlil case and how he defended his chief spy, his key ally.
Okay, Ahmed Abdi Hadi, thank you for those insights. Let's turn to northern Ethiopia. The World Food Programme estimates up to 7 million people in the region are in need of food assistance. For months, conflict in the Tigray region has displaced hundreds of thousands of people. Now, the Amhara and Afar regions are also being impacted. The WFP says it's expanding its food assistance program to those regions. The UN body has expressed fears that the north is edging closer to a potential famine. It says it is facing a funding gap as continued fighting leads to an increase of those seeking aid.
The whole journey was through the scorching sun, and the thirst for drinking water was agonizing. We were forced to drink rainwater from the ground, but it made us sick.
This is Africa Live, 20 minutes into the hour. Let's take our short break. Coming up, relief in Zimbabwe as schools reopen more than 2 months later than scheduled. And more on why Johnson & Johnson have stopped a study for an experimental HIV vaccine in South Africa.
In July 2020, when a bulk carrier ran aground in Mauritius, local fishermen were among the first to propose solutions, but the government preferred to wait for foreign specialists to arrive.
Tout le monde peut poser question, est-ce que ce bateau-là capable de faire affaire? Nous disons oui, marée basse, d'une rentrée, mais avec une marée haute, vous appellerez ça aussi.
In the meantime, the ship split in two, spilling an estimated 1,000 tons of oil into the pristine ecosystem. But anger was mounting with the government's delayed response, and the protests soon grew into a national movement.
Nigeria's northeast state of Adamawa has converted 30 out of 34 junior boarding schools to day schools because of security concerns. The government says the directive is to ensure the safety of students and tackle rising cases of kidnapping in schools in the region. Tessem Akende tells us more from Jos in Nigeria.
Commissioner for Education in Adamawa State, Wilbina Jackson, says the change in the mode of operation of the schools is with immediate effect. They will now operate as day schools with the students under the watch of their parents. According to the directive, students are also to be placed in the nearest schools within their areas of residence to enable them commit short distances to and from school. The government has instructed all schools to fully comply with the directive. The decision comes shortly after gunmen abducted about 70 students at a school in the northern state of Zamfara last week. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says more than 1,000 students have been kidnapped from their schools since December last year. President Muhammadu Buhari has directed security agencies to protect schools and students and guarantee maximum safety for learning. Tessem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Schools in Zimbabwe have reopened more than 2 months later than scheduled. This comes as the country prepares to begin vaccinating children above the age of 14 against the COVID-19 pandemic. Farai Mokutuya reports.
In addition to strict prevention protocols, Zimbabwe's government is planning to give returning students an additional layer of protection from COVID-19. Children aged between 14 and 17 will soon be able to get vaccinated despite a low infection rate in young people.
Out of more than the 124,000 cases of COVID, only 9.2% are in the teenage group. So less than 10%. So that is the kind of occurrence that you see.
Zimbabwe is among the first countries in Africa to extend vaccinations to children, a decision that's been met with mixed reactions.
From what we have seen so far, this disease is deadly, so if they can prevent it, it will be a good thing.
Since young people have much stronger immune systems than adults, we should just let them fight the disease naturally. Right now, very few young people are getting infected, so what is the need for them to get the vaccine?
Perhaps the scientists have done their research and found that the vaccine has no bad effects on people that age.
Zimbabwe has stepped up its vaccination drive in recent weeks and hopes that by opening it up to teenagers, it can not only achieve herd immunity much quicker, but also help to overcome some of the vaccine hesitancy that has been witnessed here.
Because, the younger ones tend to use social media much more than the older age groups. It is much easier to reach out to them, and probably issues of vaccine hesitance. While we, as I said, we still need to observe how they behave. One does not expect it to be that much of a bigger problem in that kind of age group compared to the older age group. If that turns out to be the case, hopefully it turns out to be the case. If it turns out to be the case, then we can actually have a big receptive group that we can interact with, and that we hope can then influence their parents, their teachers, their communities to actually get onto vaccination in the end.
By September 6th, more than 1.7 million Zimbabweans had been fully vaccinated. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Ugandan health officials say the country will ramp up its COVID-19 vaccination campaign following the arrival of Moderna vaccines donated by the US. Uganda is one of many African countries still struggling to get hold of enough doses. Leon Senyange reports.
More than 647,000 doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine donated by the US government now safely on Ugandan soil. The US ambassador to Kampala says this shipment is part of her country's partnership with Uganda's government in the fight against COVID-19.
Before COVID-19's arrival in Uganda, medical and public health experts from the US mission worked hand in hand with Ugandan health professionals to prevent, detect, and respond to COVID-19. This ongoing collaboration builds on our decades-long health partnership in Uganda, focusing on HIV/AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis.
While the US is already vaccinating teenagers, Uganda's health minister says these doses will be given to priority population groups. The Moderna vaccine is administered in 2 doses, generally 4 weeks apart.
I would like to encourage, especially those in the priority groups, including the health workers, the teachers, and the elderly, without forgetting the forces, to get vaccinated. Vaccinating of the 4.8 million priority groups will enable opening up of many areas that are still closed, including the schools.
Uganda recently stepped up its mass vaccination program against COVID-19, with many citizens relieved to finally get jabbed.
I would call upon everyone to come for the vaccination because it is for our own benefit, for our health. It is not painful. They should come and take the vaccine.
Right now, it's past 2 months since I had COVID, so I thought this was the right time to take it.
More than 1.4 million people have been vaccinated so far with the AstraZeneca and Chinese Sinovac vaccines. The country plans to vaccinate 22 million people by next year. Another 1.1 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine are expected to arrive later this month, but the country will need to get hold of millions more to hit its target. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Johnson & Johnson have stopped a study for an experimental HIV vaccine. The study found the vaccine did not provide sufficient protection against infection. It targeted young women in sub-Saharan Africa at high risk of HIV infection. Angela Coppola reports.
2,600 women in 5 African countries received 4 doses of a vaccine regime in the Imbokoro study.
After following up women, we found that we did not induce enough protection to to move the evaluation further. And so in terms of our protocol analysis, we said that if our lower bound of the confidence interval dips below 0, we would not have enough power to move forward.
Researchers have uncovered some useful information for this proof of concept study.
We're going to gain a lot because this is the first time we've seen a hint of protection against HIV in women. And we'll do immunological studies, and we will look at the women who looked like there was high levels of protection. We will look at their immune response, and we'll compare that to women who had low rates of protection. We will also look and see what immune responses predicted protection. And in the future, we will be able to design a vaccine that induces those kind of immune responses that were associated with protection in this trial.
Although the Imbokoro study has been stopped, another HIV vaccine trial is underway in South America, Europe, and the United States, the Phase 3 Mosaico study.
This is a different population with a slightly modified regimen in a more well-powered study. And so this will give us a good indication about whether this vaccine does work when you take it to scale or you look at different population groups.
The 2,600 women won't be left in the lurch now that the study is over.
We will continue to see them, and they'll get unblinded, and they'll get referred for treatment for better prevention modalities. We do know that that PrEP does work, and to counsel women to continue to use PrEP, so to prevent them being exposed to prevent them from getting HIV if they get exposed to HIV. We have high rates of HIV incidence in these women, showing us that whatever we're doing, the socio-behavioral interventions, the STI treatment, the counseling is not effective enough, which also tells us we need a more potent biomedical intervention.
HIV has been around for 40 years, and a search for a vaccine continues despite the setback. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Time now to catch up with the day's business news, and we cross over to Ucha for the latest.
Thank you, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Egypt records the highest monthly revenue from the Suez Canal. And Tanzania seeks new taxpayers to increase their revenue collection.
The East China Sea, home of dream seekers, where China's hub for reform and opening up connects with the maritime Silk Road. Whether it's exploring the busiest seaport and trade zone, or witnessing how locals strive for a better life. Join CGTN's adventure, Tides of Change Part 2. A journey enchanted by a dynamic ocean and beyond.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how whole stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And let's start off in Egypt. The Suez Canal recorded its highest monthly revenue in its history in the month of August. Now, the maritime passageway on the Red Sea garnered nearly $560 million from close to 1,900 passing vessels. That's an overall 4.2% increase in passing vessels in the first 7 months of 2021, and that's compared to the same period last year. Well, CGTN's Yasser Hakim reports on how the North African waterway has managed to recover from the pandemic-induced slowdown.
Official figures by Egyptian authorities show a strong rebound, with 1,884 vessels crossing the Suez Canal, carrying 100 million tons of products in the month of August alone. That's over 5% increase than the year before, with revenue exceeding pre-pandemic levels. The Suez Canal has had a tough year, not just with the breakout of the coronavirus pandemic, but also with the 10-day saga concerning the Evergreen vessel, which has blocked the vital waterway earlier this year. But the record Suez Canal revenue reflects a speedy recovery. International trade and cargo traffic is increasing globally. Experts say it's also a result of a positive response from the Suez Canal authorities.
The Suez Canal management is dynamic as it seeks to keep up the international developments. They are developing the southern sector of the Suez Canal to increase its depth to more than 70 feet from the current 66 feet, as well as widening the canal. There are big investments being made to adopt information technology in managing the maritime traffic. There are discounts given to many vessels, especially those going to Western Europe and the US, to attract the highest number of container ships.
There's also been talk of an emergence of alternative shipping lines, like Russia's Northern Sea route. But experts believe the Egyptian canal is still unique.
These routes are not competitive for many reasons. For example, the Northern Sea route faces freezing waters for 6 months a year, and it's costly because you need nuclear-powered vessels to break through the ice. Besides the strategic location, the Suez Canal is the safest waterway in the world, with the least number of incidents. In its 150 years, there were basically 0 incidents except the Ever Given one. It's the shortest maritime passage in the world to link the East with the West.
The Suez Canal accounts for 10% of global trade. It's also a main focal point on the Belt and Road Initiative. In spite of recent challenges, the record $560 million monthly revenue means it's still the preferred route by international shipping companies. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Tanzania's Revenue Authority says it is working to expand the scope for revenue collection by improving a tax infrastructure and exploring new taxpayers. These strategies aim to ensure a friendly environment for taxpayers and to make sure the collection reaches the projection of about $9.4 billion in its next financial year.
The Tanzania Revenue Authority has been running public education campaigns through the media and visiting trading areas with a message to promote proper uses of EFD machines and understanding the importance of paying taxes, and as well solving the challenges related to collecting tax. This move comes several months after President Samia Suluhu gave directives to the Revenue Authority to create a conducive environment for taxpayers that will ensure voluntary tax paying for the country's development.
What we've done as TRA, we've noted that out there are a number of taxpayers for some reasons that have not been registered. They are trading, but they have not been registered. Some of them weren't registered for various reasons. Probably they saw the process cumbersome. The others probably they were just not willing to pay. But since we've made it convenient in their own locations and also forwarded some of them to their shops and their business areas, they have no reason not to comply.
The registration of new taxpayers is expected to contribute to monthly and yearly collections that have also been growing. So far, the Tanzania Revenue Authority has been recording an increase in revenue collection, which is a result of the awareness on paying tax.
This financial year, what is the target that has been given to us by the government is about 22 trillion Tanzania shillings. And that contributes to about 60%, apart from other sources that government has to important to be able to meet its total budget. One important thing to remember is that we're also getting a lot of support from the government to be able to achieve this. And we've seen a good trend, seeing the collections from July and August. We are very optimistic that we'll have a very good year in terms of revenue collection.
Tanzania will use the revenue to finance development, strengthen the capacity for industrial production and service delivery, as well as add value to agricultural products and ensure a competitive economy in the country.
We administer tax exemptions that are an incentive to investors in certain specific targeted areas. For instance, for those who want to invest in agriculture or agricultural processing, there are quite a number of attractive tax incentives there to make them to be able to invest. For those who also want to invest in car assembly, there are also some very attractive tax incentives there. For those who want to invest in pharmaceuticals, there are also very attractive incentives there.
Apart from expanding the tax base, the Tanzanian government, in its 2021-2022 financial year, approved the changes in fees and tax systems. The country's goal is to promote investment in the country by ensuring tax incentives. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Now, Ghana's construction industry is starting to rebuild after months of disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Ratings agency Fitch has ranked the sector the 6th most attractive market in sub-Saharan Africa. But as CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai now reports, real estate developers in Ghana are still concerned about a recent hike in the cost of building materials.
Kojo Williams's real estate business took a hit when the COVID-19 pandemic struck last year. Lockdown restrictions forced him to halt all his building projects.
People were not sure about the future because of the pandemic, so everybody wanted to hold on to whatever they had. So all agreements and investment, sources and all of that became pending, because people wanted to know what the pandemic would bring and how it was going to pan out.
With restrictions now eased, Williams says his business is beginning to pick up, but building houses has become more expensive.
The cost of construction materials over the past year or so, the cost have gone up, some going up as high as 40 to 80%. And that has actually thrown a lot of our calculations, and our permutations, out of gear.
According to government data, the real estate industry contributed significantly to Ghana's economic growth at the end of last year, when coronavirus restrictions were eased. Real estate developers say they are having to push up prices due to the rising cost of building materials. This 4-bedroom home was $180,000 before the pandemic hit. It's now on the market for $210,000. Ratings agency Fitch says Ghana's construction industry has grown by 14% this year after contracting by 5% last year. The agency links the growth to political stability and an attractive labor market, but some aren't so sure the sector has completely bounced back.
A lot of projects are being initiated today. We are not seeing, the project, especially when it comes to housing. If you find out how many contracts were signed in the past administration in terms of contract to execute certain housing projects, the numbers are so huge. If you put them together, we might be hitting about 2 million. But have you seen, even 100 of it? So sometimes I'm not too sure where they are picking the data from.
Developers like Kojo Williams hope Ghana's economic recovery from the pandemic will stay on track so he can find buyers for these brand new homes. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And on to some international news. China has been moving towards greener and smarter construction and engineering, from the 2022 Winter Olympics venues to the very infrastructure for this year's China International Fair for Trade in Services. And now participants at the trade fair are showing Beijing's determination to meet its low carbon goals. Here's CGTN's Sun Ye with that report.
Perhaps nowhere else in the Chinese capital better demonstrates Beijing's commitment and drive to go all green than here.
The Shogang Park is a former steel-making complex that has been turned into a champion of a green lifestyle. It's a park now, turning its workshops into conference rooms and showrooms as it now hosts the International Service Trade Fair.
绿色低碳可装卸，因为我们都是可装卸式的展馆，而且它是钢结构。
If you look at the safety exhibition halls, they are part of our green, low-carbon, reusable efforts. We can dismantle these steel exhibition halls for reuse too. And we also have other areas outdoors, built green, so there's no need for air conditioning.
The park will also feature in the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games, and companies at the fair are also showcasing how the Games venues will be smart, multifunctional, and energy-saving, including plans to convert the water cube into the ice cube.
This plan not only would change water to ice, but would allow the venue to also quickly transform into a convention center. Our solution ensures a fast transition between 3 different functions, as quick as 15 days' time.
The company is also showing how tech has made the center sensitive, even caring. It keeps temperatures at -8.5 Celsius on the ice surface, but a stable 16 to 18 degrees for spectators. Also on show, new raw materials that go into roads and the highways to the Olympic venues.
So what remains of the steel factory, including the rust and the pipes, remind us really that this is a thing of the past. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, more on the Bank for International Settlements plans to test the use of central bank digital currencies with Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, and South Africa. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live, plenty more coming up, including this. We'll look at rising concerns in Egypt over the welfare of domestic animals.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
For centuries, many rural African economies have relied on hardy animals that can withstand drought to ferry goods and do other domestic work. Donkeys, horses, and mules are among those most used. However, concerns have been raised about the mistreatment and abuse of these animals. Yasser Hakim looks at the situation in Egypt, where camels have been used for centuries in the vast desert areas inhabited by the Bedouin tribes.
Chief Ayman El-Madni is negotiating a sales deal while his workers are preparing his herd of camels at the weekly Barqash camel market in Giza city. Madni is head of a tribe in Sinai and owns about 200 camels.
Camels have many uses. Some people buy camels to eat their meat, which is low in fat, while others buy them for milk. There is also a type of camel used for transport. It can carry many things on its back in the desert. Some farmers also use it to help in cultivating land. Camels have strong stamina and can withstand hunger and thirst in tough conditions.
Camels are also in demand for use in tourism, where camel rides remain popular. There are some camels that are used in racing as well. The camels available here are the Egyptian and Sudanese types, and they're usually found at the Barqash camel market, the largest of its kind in Egypt. However, this market's reputation has been marred by reports of several camel abuse incidents.
I saw people beating camels and others who overuse them with extra burden and mistreatment. This is horrible behavior, no ethics, and people should be forced to change their treatment of the camels, especially beating and injuring them. This treatment goes against our beliefs.
Authorities had cracked down on the market and are constantly monitoring it to ensure such abuses don't take place. Dr. Muhammad Mohsin is a vet who had to deal with cases of animal abuse, and he has praised efforts by local authorities to counter this trend.
The Barkesh market suddenly became the center of attention on social media, with videos on Facebook showing injured camels that had been mistreated and the lack of animal health services. The state moved quickly to stop this. Many laws have been amended to be more stringent, not just to deal with abuse of camels, but also cats, dogs, and other animals. Punishment now includes long-term jail sentences.
Mohsin believes that it's not just pets that should be given better veterinary services, as larger domestic animals like camels and cows also need extra care to remain healthy and avoid disease. All sides agree that what is also needed is an extensive public awareness campaign to promote animals' rights and bring an end to the animal abuse in the North African country. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And coming up in sports news.